When we talk about the history of American money, most people immediately imagine the green paper bills printed by the U.S. Treasury, stamped with the faces of presidents and famous historical figures. Yet centuries before the United States had an official currency, the early settlers, merchants, and communities of colonial America relied on a much more primitive and improvised system of exchange. To understand how the United States eventually created the dollar, we need to go back to the 17th and 18th centuries, when money in the American colonies was not standardized, and commerce depended on creativity, necessity, and adaptability. Life without currency. When the first English settlers arrived in North America in the early 1600s, they found themselves in an economic landscape that was vastly different from what they had known in Europe. In England, transactions were conducted using pounds, shillings, and pence. Coins were made of silver and gold, minted under royal authority and widely trusted. But in the New World, access to official British coins was extremely limited. The colonies were far from the royal mints of London, and the crown rarely sent large amounts of currency overseas. This shortage of official coins posed a serious challenge. Colonists needed a way to buy and sell goods, pay workers, and settle debts. Yet without coins, barter became the most common solution. Barter meant trading goods directly. For example, a farmer might exchange bushels of corn for a pair of shoes, or a carpenter might repair a wagon in return for sacks of wheat. While barter worked in small communities, it was inconvenient and inefficient. Goods were not always of equal value, and people often struggled to find a fair trade. The lack of standardized money forced the colonists to get creative. Over time, they began to adopt commodity money, using items that were widely available, valued by the community, and could serve as a substitute for coins. Tobacco as money. One of the earliest and most famous forms of commodity money in colonial America was tobacco. In Virginia, tobacco was not only the main cash crop, but also the lifeblood of the colony's economy. By the 1620s, tobacco had become so valuable that it was accepted as a medium of exchange. A contract might state that rent for farmland was due in pounds of tobacco rather than silver coins. Court fines could also be paid with tobacco, and even clergy salaries were sometimes measured in barrels of the crop. A pound of tobacco had a generally recognized value, and warehouses kept records of deposits and withdrawals, functioning almost like early banks. However, using tobacco as money came with problems. Tobacco leaves were perishable, vulnerable to rot, pests, and weather damage. Their value fluctuated with harvest yields, and counterfeiting was common. People sometimes tried to pay with low-quality leaves. Despite these challenges, tobacco remained a cornerstone of Virginia's economy and one of the earliest currencies in America. Wampum in New England. In New England, another form of money emerged. Wampum, the strings of polished shell beads crafted by Native American tribes. For indigenous peoples, wampum held deep cultural and spiritual significance. It was used in ceremonies, treaties, and storytelling. Europeans, recognizing its symbolic value and the skill required to produce it, began to use wampum as a medium of exchange and trade with native tribes. By the 1630s, colonial governments in Massachusetts and Connecticut declared wampum to be legal tender for small debts, especially when English coins were scarce. A certain number of beads, usually made from the purple and white shells of quahog clams, equaled a penny or a shilling. Yet just like tobacco, wampum's value was unstable. As demand for wampum grew, mass production began, leading to oversupply and inflation. By the late 1600s, wampum had largely fallen out of use as currency among Europeans, though it continued to hold ceremonial importance among native peoples. Barter, grain. Other colonies experimented with different forms of commodity money. In parts of the northern colonies, grain, such as wheat or corn, was used in transactions. Farmers paid taxes or debts in bushels of grain, which were deposited into public granaries. Grain certificates, representing the stored crops, could then circulate as a kind of paper substitute for the physical commodity. Livestock also served as money in some cases. A cow, a horse, or even beaver pelts could be used to settle large debts. The beaver trade was especially important in the fur-rich northern regions, where European demand for fur hats fueled a thriving economy. This patchwork of barter and commodity currencies meant that money in the colonies was never uniform. Each region had its own preferred form of exchange, often tied directly to the local economy. Foreign coins and the Spanish dollar. While commodities were the most common forms of money in early America, foreign coins also played a significant role. The most widely used coin was the Spanish dollar, also known as the piece of 8 minted in Spanish colonies from silver mined in the Americas. The Spanish dollar was durable, recognizable, and trusted across international trade networks. Its popularity in the colonies was so great that it eventually influenced the creation of the US dollar. In fact, the dollar symbol is thought to have derived from the scroll-like design stamped on Spanish coins. Other coins, such as Dutch guilders, French livre, and Portuguese cruzados, also circulated, adding to the diverse monetary system of the colonies. The challenge of a fragmented system. The absence of a unified currency created confusion and inefficiency. Imagine a merchant in Boston who traded in wampum trying to do business with a planter from Virginia who used tobacco as payment, or a farmer in Pennsylvania trying to settle debts owed in pounds sterling when he had only Spanish dollars in hand. Colonial governments attempted to regulate this fragmented system by passing laws to standardize values, but these efforts were rarely successful. The colonies' dependence on Britain for official coins, combined with their growing economic independence, created tension that would later fuel demands for financial sovereignty. The seeds of a national currency. Despite its difficulties, the colonial experience with barter, commodities, and foreign coins laid the foundation for America's monetary system. Colonists learned the importance of trust, stability, and standardization in money. They saw firsthand how inflation, scarcity, and poor quality could undermine an economy. When the Revolutionary War began in 1775, the Continental Congress issued the first paper currency, the Continental Dollar, to fund the war effort. Though it eventually collapsed due to inflation, the idea of a national currency was born. After independence, the United States would take these lessons and gradually build a unified system, culminating in the creation of the U.S. Mint in 1792 and the establishment of the dollar as the nation's official currency. Conclusion. The story of money in colonial America is a tale of necessity, improvisation, and adaptation. In the absence of coins from Europe, colonists turned to what they had: tobacco, wampum, grain, fur, livestock, and foreign silver coins. Each form of currency reflected the unique circumstances of its region, shaping the economy in creative and sometimes unstable ways. Though fragmented and inconsistent, these early monetary systems prepared the ground for the eventual birth of the American dollar. The struggles of the colonies to find reliable money helped shape the economic identity of the United States, teaching lessons that remain relevant even today. The American dollar we carry today is more than just a piece of paper or a digital number in a bank account. It is the result of centuries of experimentation, failure, and innovation in the pursuit of trust and stability in trade. Thank you for watching this video. For those of you who like videos about old times, you can subscribe for free to this channel.